Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. Be sure never to keep any more funds than you absolutely need for trading on any single exchange. The whole point of leverage is to allow you to reduce your counterparty risk and not keep all of your trading collateral in one place. Even among exchanges, I would split up your stack just in case. With that out of the way, Don, a bit of a serious start to the show. My understanding is you're accused of committing a crime, and that crime is buying monthly, weekly, and daily resistance and getting away with it when it comes to BTC. So how do you plead to those very serious charges?
I mean, guilty as charged. No, I mean, I didn't quite buy daily resistance,
That's true.
but the monthly and the weekly thing, yes, most definitely. I mean, it went well in the end, but it's not technically the cleanest trade, even though I got in at the bottom and sold the top. But still,
That's such a Don quote right there. It's like quintessential Duck. Like, oh, it wasn't that good. I only bought the bottom and sold the top.
No,
Like,
I mean,
okay.
I'm not saying it's a bad trade. I'm just saying, like, if you just look at it face value, like, what are the reasons to get into it, like all that kind of stuff. How high was the conviction? Everything was kind of shitty, but the end result was okay. There's always, I think, in trading, there's always a difference between the end result that you get and what you actually did. So I think you can have a decent trade that stops you out, and you can have a really bad trade that actually makes you profit. But I think a lot of people would argue otherwise, say like trading is just like the result that you get at the end. But I think if you execute cleanly and if you have a really good plan and idea of what you're doing, and it just doesn't work out, that doesn't have to be a bad trade necessarily.
Yeah, especially as your trading sample size goes up, like the sheer number of trades, you'd expect those trends to become a bit more fleshed out, where your good decision making just becomes more positively correlated with returns, and your, lucky punts, so to speak, kind of bleed out over time. So It's like one of the worst things that can happen if you're just a new trader. It's like winning your first trade, or like going on a particular sort of streak of short-term wins and luck. That can really create the illusion that you've cracked it, and then when you get through that chunk of variance, if there's no underlying strategy to go with it, and then you end up on the other side of it, that's not a good experience.
Yeah, definitely agree.
But it also happens on like macro scales, right? Sort of that was 2017 for a lot of people, myself included, where I'm like, oh well, markets are easy; they kind of just go up, and you have to hold stuff. This is great. And then 2018, 2019, you're like, oh, I see that wasn't how things normally are,
Oh yeah, I think in general, anyone that says trading is easy is either delusional, an idiot, or just started out, or is trying to get you in the paid group. Like, I don't think there's anyone that does this for a living that says like it's easy. Sometimes it feels easy for a period of time, but like the whole thing is pretty hard to make work. And I mean, we all know the statistic of how many people actually make it out alive being a trader, and it's not that many. So anyone that says it's easy probably lost their marbles, I think.
I think that's fair. Let's do the BTC bit. We've got a week until the monthly close, Don, and I'm not sure this would be a particularly good monthly close if it closes in this nature. So this is part of the reasoning you shared on Twitter, that essentially the market pushed into the underside of monthly resistance at 27.2k. And it looks like that resistance is resisting, at least from the available evidence. And that would just be a sort of, if it closes around here, that would be a bearish retest of sorts, right? Like, it's obviously not some mega rejection candle at the moment or anything of that nature. But in terms of making progress on the monthly chart, if you wanted to map it out, I think the way you do it is you'd want to close above 27.2. The other side of that range is at 29, and then you can break out towards like 35, 38, whatever. And we seem to be stumbling on the first step of that. And I think we had a breakdown last month. If this month results in a bearish retest and doesn't sort of fulfill any of those reclaim criteria, if we finally get moving, and I know that sounds silly to say given vol has been a bit higher recently, but on the monthly time frame, we really haven't been moving anywhere, right? We're stuck around 30k. A bit below 30k gets bought, bit above 30k gets sold, but we've been, for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, basically half a year at around 30k. So then if the question is, when are we going to trade the next monthly levels? if this midpoint price action develops such that we have a monthly breakdown, monthly retest of that breakdown, my inclination would be that monthly support at 23 to 20 is more likely to get retested than monthly resistance, which is up at 35. Do you think that's fair for the monthly? Are there any candle closes or signals you're looking for on this time frame?
No, I totally agree with you. I think it's not the best look if we have this candle going straight into resistance after a breakdown. Now the breakdown wasn't explosive. The breakout before wasn't really either.
True.
Like this has just been very choppy. So I'm not like, okay, this is a bearish retest. No, we have to go down. Like I'm not in that camp, but I'm also like not super like just doesn't look good. I mean, it's not bullish, is what I would say. It's not too bearish given just how shitty the last few months have been. When it's chopping around, I just don't take the signals as serious as if it's just trading cleanly. But I mean, it's not a good look, most definitely.
Yeah, it looks like more waiting for the monthly time frame enjoyers for now, at least. Because, there are monthly levels, obviously, at 27, 29, but like the really good ones are up in the 30s and down in the 20s. So stand by for those, I suppose. The weekly chart, this is an interesting one because the area of resistance that we keep testing is maybe slightly harder than usual to define in very clear terms. Like, I think you've got that entire cluster boxed out. Is that right? The 22nd of May weekly candle.
Yes.
That's like an overall area of resistance, but it's quite big. And so I think you could at least split, not you as in you should do this because you're doing it wrong, but one could at least split it up into, at least the range low and the range high of that candle or of that pre-breakdown range. But even doing that essentially gets you the monthly view on a faster moving time frame. So if you do that, for example, then we've just retested the underside at 26.7, 26.8. And we even actually wicked into the middle of that range at 27.4, which also happens to be, again, that monthly resistance level. And that's kind of the point I tried to make on Monday markets, that like as we push into 27K, there's just a lot of resistance stuff that lines up here. And it'd be really nice if we can just blast through it, but that hasn't been the market recently, and it's just like a really tricky area to long into because it's just layers upon layers from the high time frames. So given you've got that whole box in mind, for me at least, this looks like just a retest of resistance. Now, obviously, I can start making decently compelling cope arguments. Like if it keeps wicking into 27 but not actually moving lower on the time frame, that can gradually become bullish. I'm sure having internalized it, the type of price action I'm talking about, where you get like wick but no rejection, eventually it grinds up and breaks. But in terms of what's in front of us, I think regardless of how you chop up this 26, 27 area, it just looks like resistance as well on the weekly. Are there any saving graces on the weekly time frame that you think, okay, well, the monthly is bearish retest, but if the weekly does this, it'll start to look better? Have you just got the whole box and you're like, fuck it, this is the box now?
Yeah, I kind of have the box, but I do agree, like the top and the bottom of the box are the important parts.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't like this. It's basically, we had a breakdown, and now we're just barely going up, right? We had 3 weeks of downside, and then we've had now 2 weeks of upside. Didn't really do anything.
1.5 done.
1.5, yeah. So it's like it's not really moving, right? And whenever you get these kind of like SFPs, whatever, people start getting bullish and start positioning themselves for this. And I mean, there is one like that 11th September weekly candle wicked below all of the other wicks, right? So you have a bunch of people basically trying to trade that. And I mean, it's fair, but I want them to be rewarded if I'm on their side, right? Quickly. Otherwise, I think there's just a bunch of people sitting in a position that is not good. And given that all ended up at resistance and it's getting aggressively sold in that resistance every time it approaches it, it's not a good look. And I think in general, like we would have to close above 28K to make the weekly look good.
So the upper boundary.
Then, yeah, it's the upper boundary of that candle, of that box.
Yeah.
And unless you're trading above there, this is just bearish. You can try to be bullish, and I mean, I tried, right? And you can try to kind of make your arguments fit this, but just looking at it without bias, I think this is just not a good look, and it's not bullish either. Can be bullish if it goes up, and I'm kind of like starting to remove the resistance at 30K on my chart, just because I think if we manage to break through 28K, 30K is probably not going to be a problem. So it can flip bullish quite quickly if it does a little bit, but so far it's done nothing. And the only evidence that we have is of bearish nature, and that's not really what you want to see.
Yeah, the weekly definitely could use some rescuing, but not available quite yet. The daily time frame is probably one of the weaker ones. I mean, obviously none of them look amazing for the time being, but if you have do you still have the daily cluster as a reference point when it comes to the daily time frame?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, the 26.9 to, and again, that same old level, 27.2, 27.4, daily resistance. The daily close around that, I would argue, was quite bad, which was yesterday's close. Because essentially we tested the very tippity top of, which is a technical term, of that resistance. And now yesterday we closed through the bottom of it. So as far as trading around the extremes, it looks like peak resistance resisted, and then the arse fell out of this thing when it came to the cluster as a whole. So that's the daily time frame view. I think if you wanted to make a supportive case for it, I think you know how on the weekly, the 29K weekly, or like 28, 29K cluster top is a sort of early-ish aggressive signal. I think if you're really keen to play the bullish side, you can use the same on the daily time frame. So like if it starts getting above 27.4, you're still kind of in an area of weekly and monthly resistance, but at least you've got something on your side that could sort of translate to the higher time frames, right? Like if you're looking for faster acting signals, you have the daily cluster breakout on your side, you can start to make a case for that flowing over. But at the moment, we've had almost textbook bearish price action around this level, hit the top, and then the arse fell out. So that's not amazing. If you want to cope, though, with daily levels, the best I can offer is 26.4, which is a very messy daily range high. It was kind of the mini sort of rally we had on the 23rd of August before we had the mega grayscale chop through it. And since then, I think it's been like a decent level. So if you want to bet on that, I think that's your kind of the only option you have. Because even on intraday timeframes, like for example, I've got the 4-hour chart up at the moment. If you lose 26.4, then even on a intraday basis, this turns into like a pretty ugly deviation type of thing. And it's a deviation coming from or as you would say, off of a higher time frame level of resistance. So do you care at all about 26.4, or are you a daily cluster maxi and anything below that is garbage because reasons?
Yeah, I'm kind of a cluster maxi.
Okay, I'll delete it. I get it.
No, I'm actually not a hater. The thing is just that it seems pretty, like you said, it seems pretty easy to, if you really wanted to be flipping bullish, you just flip bullish back above 27.4. So I don't want to buy support that I don't trust if I can buy higher, which sounds stupid, but it's just how I prefer it. In this case. And the cool thing is, and this is something you mentioned as well, is that if you flip the daily to be bullish, then you can flip the weekly to be bullish, and then you can flip the monthly. Like it oftentimes goes like this, where everything is against you, and then it just needs to do a little bit, and the time frames just fall in line one after the other, and aggressive kind of entries are rewarded. So that's kind of what I would like to see on this one. Close above 27.4, 27.5. So the daily looks good, and then that can go into a weekly breakout, because if the daily looks good chance that it carries like price a little bit higher. Doesn't take much to go from 27.5 to 28.5. That would break the weekly resistance, and then once you've broken 28.5 on the weekly, it wouldn't really take much to get through the 29K resistance on the monthly, right? So there is like, this stuff could fall in line, but yeah, I don't want to kind of do this early. I just want to
10 steps ahead, gold medal, mental gymnastics and stuff. Yeah, and I know that feeling. It's like, okay, Don, so you're saying if I start longing on the 5-minute, and then that fixes the 15-minute, that fixes the hourly, then fixes the 4-hour, then the 12-hour, then the daily, you can perform that exercise on virtually any time frame if you don't take it sort of seriously. But I think there is something to be said for the daily being a sufficiently large moving and efficient trigger for the higher time frames. So it kind of deserves its own category, I think. Out of all the reasons, I mean, you sold pretty high up into the daily cluster. what was, because before that on Twitter you were shitposting about like inverse altcoins and getting people more angry and stuff, which you seem to be enjoying these days.
Oh yeah, it's the only thing I enjoy.
It's the only thing you enjoy. Yeah, not Casual Friday. Fuck that. What was the out of all the reasons that you decided to de-risk 27.4? What was the most compelling one? Or I guess in another way, what was the skew between technical reasons for selling versus non-technical reasons, or just any color there would be appreciated, I think.
So I mean, I had a bunch of altcoin maxis in my comments for the entire week, basically, because I made like some comments why I wouldn't be buying ETH and I wouldn't be buying altcoins. And the comment was basically just, we have a Bitcoin ETF coming. I don't see the point, right? And then the entire week I got, and this is while I was in a position for Bitcoin, right? And the entire week I got people writing me being like, oh, you're so dumb, you don't know how to trade, altcoins have so much more upside, like just shut the fuck up, basically. And I was like, where's this coming from, right? And it just seems like people are struggling in altcoins, lost a shitload of money, and now are looking for yes men that tell them that everything is good in the altcoin world, which fair enough. But like I saw that and I was like, okay, if it's that bad and people are struggling that bad, am I just like being an idiot on my Bitcoin position? Because usually what I like to do is I like to buy stuff when you've just shaken those people that are hurting out, right? As in, like, you liquidate a bunch of people, you make them sell. And I usually don't like to buy when people are kind of struggling but still holding on, right? Like, that's a bad combination, because then one move lower and you suddenly have a bunch of people dumping on your ass. So I was like, I was already very low conviction on the trade in general. It's something I've been mentioning on this show as well last week, and also on Twitter. So I was like, maybe I'm being dumb. And then I looked at the charts and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely being dumb. Like, this is weekly resistance, it's monthly resistance, it's daily resistance. And no matter how like tight the risk to reward was, I was like, this just seems like it's not going to break out. And even if it breaks out, I can have much better, safer setup higher. The setup was okay in general, given that I took it quite low. But the higher price went, the worse the setup got, right? Because then you basically risk all of that P&L that you've made. And the reward is not that great. So I was just like, fuck it. Don't really see the point. People still seem to have hope in the altcoin land, and that's generally not the best. So it was kind of mix of both. But I would say technicals more so than the people in my comments. But something that the people in my comments always get me to do is basically check the charts properly, being like, am I being an idiot, right? Because if you get told by 100 people that you're an idiot and don't know what you're doing, you're like, okay, like if one person tells me this, maybe he's like, probably he's an idiot. But if 100 people tell you, maybe there's something there. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna check again. And I did, and I was like, it's actually much worse than I thought it was. So fuck it, I'm gonna close, and turned out to be the right decision. Got pretty close to the top. Like my exit was around 27.4, which is pretty close to where it actually ended up.
Easy to time the top when you make it, Don, I've heard. So
nah, I'm not big enough for that, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. So maybe like 65 to 70% technical, and the remainder is antagonistic sentiment farming as usual.
Yeah,
so
yeah. It does help. Like,
I'm sure.
Like it's the best thing I would say about Twitter is basically like just see how other people are doing in the market. And what I think people do wrong is that they're like, I'm following these 200 traders and they say this and that, and they're all in agreement, so I have to do the opposite, right? But why are you following them in the first place? Like, you'd have to look for big idiots and then follow them and then counter trade them if you wanted to, right? But what I have, the advantage on my end, is that I have like a bunch of followers, and you do too, that are more like newer to the market, and it's not like we're choosing them, right? Like, they choose us. So you have the followers basically that are not following you because they are geniuses. It's because, I mean, they just like your content or whatever. So it's easier. Basically, the argument I'm trying to make is, if you follow a bunch of people, because they're good, and then you try to counter trade them. It seems like a dumb thing to do. But if you have a bunch of people that don't necessarily know what they're doing, and they come into your comments and then insult you, it's a little bit of a different story. So it's been like a little bit helpful. Like I like to kind of sentiment farm from time to time. And whenever I'm like not entirely sure about position, or if I want to add some size, I'm like, okay, let me see what the world out there thinks. And that's one of the best ways that I found to use Twitter for me to add to my trading. Usually it doesn't, like 99% of the time it doesn't, but in the rare occurrences where people are just very, very aggressive, or in general just very fearful or very excited, it can help.
I don't know. I thought the best part about Twitter was all the advisory tokens, but apparently I'm not doing it correctly. So
I mean, we're not getting any of those.
Yeah, I know. Hit our DMs. I mean, don't do that, because I just say no. Dude, have you noticed there's like an insane amount of Russian speakers who do all the kind of altcoin exchange outreach BD roles? And so they always draft this super long message, which I don't really read, about these projects and tokens or whatever. And then I just say in Russian, like, "Нет, спасибо." And then they're like, "Oh, you speak Russian and shit." And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, the conversation's over. Like, that wasn't an invitation to become friends, you know? I'm just saying no to your shill. In any case, yeah, all of that makes sense. It's good to get some color on your decision making, although I would disagree with you that 99% of the time you don't use sentiment. Maybe it's closer to like 85%, 75 to 85%, because I know you like to cast the net out more often than that, Don. So
probably, actually,
yeah, that's BTC at least. On the ETH front, I'm really tired of writing Technical Roundup and talking shit about ETH, but it needs to stop going down. That's maybe the simplest proposal I have.
It doesn't. It just needs to keep going down.
So I can copy paste the same thing every week. Thanks for reading.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
No. We have to have like a proper shakeout on ETH. I would like that. The .ETHs have been too cocky for too long.
Have they?
They need to get out. Oh, like not in the last few weeks. But for the longest time, I mean, they were like seriously discussing ETH and Bitcoin flipping, which, I mean, I like to do as anyone else would, because that's quite cool. Like, if it flips, you have the clearest trade in the world. But yeah, I mean, it's been basically 2 years of like serious ETH flipping talks, and Bitcoin is trash and ETH is great. I want to see that reverse at least for a little bit before ETH makes new highs, because I think it will, and I think at some point you're gonna probably see ETH at least threaten the flipping, but for now it looks like shit. So I actually enjoy it looking like shit, and I want to see some more of that.
Classic masochist. On that note, though, the flipping stuff tends to be an amazing top signal. Still, like, I thought it would have run out of edge, essentially. I mean, obviously you have to know who to follow and how to track the discourse, but like, historically speaking, certainly in the bull market, flipping stuff is like an incredibly high hit rate sell signal. And the shocking part is just how frequently it works. You'd think that it'd stop working after, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 times, but it's like clockwork. Same with Death of ETH party. It works both ways, right? When the ETH BTC ratio gets people really excited or really fearful, it tends to be a good. There tends to be some signal there more often than not. That said, on the USD side of things, before we look at ETH BTC, there's really not a lot to add or update from the newsletter and previous shows, etc. Because we basically had a breakdown from 1700, 1680, 1700, whatever, and it's been bleeding since then, and it hasn't really achieved anything. Like, for example, BTC offered a failed breakdown that led to the bounce that you traded, but ETH pretty much just traded into its equivalent range high, didn't reclaim anything, and has now wiped out most of that move, which isn't great. And I think the high time frame charts for ETH are also just a bit uglier and less clear. Like, for BTC, it's rather obvious like where the high time frame levels to do business are, whereas for ETH, I think it's a bit messier. I mean, just sort of casually, it seems like 1400 is some sort of area, right? Sort of Freya all-time high, bit of a messy weekly range low, but there's at least something there. And then it's basically 1K, I guess, like the actual weekly range low and the monthly range low, whatever. But aside from that, these interim sort of 1600, 1500, 1300, all this stuff is pretty messy in comparison to BTC. And then on the ETH BTC front, that thing's just been down only, and now it's actually breaking down as well.
Yep.
So it spent how many weeks? I mean, depending on week, start counting the range, but like this is like a multi-month consolidation that is now broken to the downside and is trading below 0.06 at the time of recording, at least. And I don't particularly see a strong reason for a reversal from this breakdown. It's not breaking down into like a super strong high time frame support. I also just think narratively, as always, because it's basically Bitcoin spot ETF or nothing at this stage, that's not helpful from a flows perspective. So unless it reclaims or does something cool, I don't see a reason to fade this multi-month, basically year-long trend at this point when it comes to ETH. We always have to reiterate that at least our view is that the better bull market bet overall will most likely be ETH. But in the interim, this is, again, a very serious year-long downtrend, which appears to be sort of continuing because it just broke down. So, do you have any ETH-BTC levels that we're getting close to, or just any ETH-BTC comments?
Yeah, I mean, in general, ETH-BTC is accelerating now, like it has been in the last few weeks, which is, I think, good. This is better than the bleed out that we had before. The more this accelerates, the closer we are to the bottom, I think. But then obviously, like if this accelerates more than what it has done already, the major pain is still to come. So like for the people still holding it, that's obviously not great price-wise, but time-wise, I like it better when it accelerates, right? As in, like you see big candles, you're like, okay, we might be 2 weeks out from a bottom at most. Whereas if you see these small candles that just continuously walk down, you're like, okay, this could keep on going for the next 6 months, right? So I would prefer this to actually accelerate even more, because then it starts looking capitulationary, whatever, capitulatory. I don't even know how you say that.
Begins to look like a capitulation. Probably makes everyone's lives easier.
Yeah, that's better.
Capitulatory, I think, would be correct, but
yes,
it's my second language, so I don't speak England very good.
Yeah, me neither. Also my second language, but my second language is apparently much worse than yours. But yeah, I have a level.
Kaput, ETH looks.
It's kaput.
Yeah.
I have a level at 0.056 ish, but I don't like it. That's the range low, and I'm not gonna be buying it because we walked down too far, right? Like if you dump into a range low, I can buy it, but if you walk down into a range low, it's very difficult for me. So I'm not going to. I don't see the narrative. But if this starts capitulating and starts putting in dumb prices, right? Like when you actually like look at the chart and you're like, okay, people are actually being dumb right now, then I'm down. And I think that would be like 0.047, something like that. That's where it starts getting dumb. That's where I'd be ready, even if the narrative isn't there. But right now, don't see the point. Even if this is the bottom, right? And it's something I've been saying for weeks and weeks. Like I might be shit talking ETH here at the bottom, but like I can just buy it higher. It's not like this is down much. It's just very like it's down 30% in comparison to the other altcoins, which are down 90%. So if I buy this 10% higher or 15% higher, it doesn't really make much of a difference, because if it actually does put in some bullish action, you assume that it's going to break this range to the upside, which would lead to, I would think, at least a 2x. And then I don't care about the 10% that I miss for being a little bit late to it. And me missing out on those 10% has saved me a 30% drawdown, or not quite the 30%, but maybe a 20% drawdown, because I've been saying this for weeks and weeks now, the same thing. Just give it some time, wait for at least a little bit of bullishness, or wait for people to absolutely get obliterated. One or the other, I don't really see the point in buying bleed. And something we've been talking about on the show for years now, like that bleed is just a bad bet in general.
Yeah, it just makes for bad trading as well.
Yep.
You know, when the tape is that dead, I mean, good luck. Also, it's very helpful, Don. Last week's episode was like, okay, here's Don unveiled. He just really hates buying higher and buying breakouts, so he will do anything to avoid taking those types of setups, even if it means buying inferior levels of SR. And then this week, we just casually reverse the script. Like, oh, I can just buy it higher. Who gives a fuck? It's like, okay, great. I feel like I know less after 2 weeks.
So whenever I say I can buy it higher, I'm just in my head, it's like, this is going lower.
So it's code. Okay, that's helpful. I can buy it higher, just means I'm never buying it.
I mean, now I could be wrong, right? And I'm not like someone that absolutely refuses to buy things higher if I have to. But in my head, this just goes lower, right? It's the clearest trend that we have. And if I say, okay, I can buy this higher, I'm assuming it's going to go lower. Otherwise, that wouldn't make sense. I'd be dumb otherwise, right? Like, if you think about it, I'm like, I don't think this goes lower, but I can buy it higher, so let me buy it higher. like at that point, it doesn't really make much sense. So every time I say that, I'm assuming lower. And for ETH-BTC, it just looks like it wants to go lower. And it looks like it wants to accelerate, which I hope it will, because that's going to end this bleed out quicker than just continuing the bleed.
Yeah, rip the band-aid off, essentially, from this long trend. That would be welcome.
And I mean, like, I don't hold any Bitcoin right now, and I have a bunch of ETH, right? So, like, I have a bunch of ETH basically in NFTs. I have a bunch of ETH in FriendTech. I didn't hedge any of it because who cares? It's a couple of ETH, whatever. But technically, like, when I'm shit talking ETH here, it's the only altcoin bag I hold right now. So
interesting. Yeah, contextually that makes it quite interesting. Also, just the casual, I have a bunch of ETH, I have a couple of ETH, but then for those of you who think that's a contradiction, like a couple, when Don speaks about it, means like 30 to 50 ETH. So
I have more than that, yeah.
Well, there you go. If that statement seemed at all contradictory, you're welcome. Cool. Speaking of risk assets, one of the points we made in the newsletter was that ETH-BTC is a sort of decent proxy measure or barometer for altcoin risk. And so ETH rugging hasn't been particularly great for like the altcoin larger trend in general. I don't know if you've had your eyes anywhere in altland. I haven't personally. I don't think I'm missing much. It seems like even the on-chain stuff died to a very significant extent compared to when our mentions were filled with have fun staying poor because Unibot and all this other stuff. Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic, Ten Inu.
Oh, yeah. You know, how is that doing?
I don't know. The ticker is Bitcoin, right? Yeah, I'm not going to bring up Dex screener now, but those things, they're down, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, especially Unibot, Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic, Inu, whatever. That's actually
there's a 10 there somewhere, Dom. Don't ignore the
10. That's actually, I mean, it's down a lot. It's down like 60%, but in comparison to other things, like it's not the end of the world. Like Unibot, we got absolutely roasted for. Because who doesn't want to have their money on? I don't even know what the fuck this is, so I don't want to say anything.
It's a Telegram trading bot, right?
But that's exactly what I understood. It's a Telegram trading bot, and you're not gonna get me to put my money on something like that. But I could be mid curving it, as I usually do. It's down 76% from the high. Is what it is.
Yeah, and then they launched I mean, they didn't, but there was a competitor, Banana Token, that had a problem with deployment and basically went to zero. And God, it's really messy out there. It seems like if you're taking risk when it comes to non-majors, most of it seems to be, again, either really short-term narrative news-driven, and that's becoming even more rare than it was in the preceding weeks, or it seems to be sort of yield farming via sort of social tokens, FriendTech spin-offs at the moment.
The FriendTech spin-offs are hilarious. Did you see some of them? Like what it is? I think it's Post-Tech.
Post-Tech, yes.
Oh, like I posted a screenshot of one of their messages, which said, "We want to make you all rich," basically.
Yeah. What's wrong with that, Don?
Yeah, I mean, technically nothing. But anyone that says that is just like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I've never seen a bigger red flag than that, right? If someone comes to you and is like, "I want to make you rich," it's like, dude, just no. You don't go with this person in general. Like, trust me. Like, if anyone in any point in your life comes to you and tells you that they want to make you rich, you run.
I think that's good advice. Not financial advice, obviously, but like I guess
Obviously.
life advice. So
Yes.
yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know where the risk where the risk taking is when it comes to crypto at the moment. Because at least when the on-chain stuff was happening, you could point towards what we argued were, I think correctly, generally short-term trends of on-chain, like sex stuff being dead, much like in my personal life. Therefore, the on-chain stuff gets to sort of shine in relative terms. But even that's died down now. So I don't really. I mean, is everyone just dead? If we're at a point where we're treating sort of social media esque bonding curve Ponzi's, and then sort of we get sub Ponzi's within it or copycat projects, and then treating them as yield farms, that we're really far out on the risk curve at this point, right? It's not even just like tokens or trading anymore. It's something else entirely. So I think that's at least been that's been the sort of epicenter of a lot of the risk taking and attention. But those are really dire straits, Like if you build like a hierarchy of, or sort of build out what the risk curve looks like mentally, it's like, okay, BTC, ETH, high cap alts, mid caps, low caps, on chain, and we seem to be even way past that now into sort of yield farm equivalent social type connect your Twitter tokens. And how much lower can we go? How much more degenerate can it get, Don?
I mean, with every step down, basically the volumes and kind of like the money that flows into these just kind of decreases, right?
Yes.
So like you had the decentralized exchanges, that was still quite a bit. And then you like first, obviously, the centralized exchanges went, right. They were doing a shitload of volume, and then suddenly almost nothing in the last few months. Besides the obvious, like, I don't want to call it pump and dumps, but like whatever the fuck you want to call the shit that's been happening on Binance, with the coins just going, like, with some random coins just getting basically cornered and then flying to the moon and coming all the way back down again. Like, that's the only thing that was left, right, volume wise. Then we went to the decentralized exchanges. There was a little bit less, actually quite a bit less than on the centralized exchanges, but a little bit. And now we're like pretty much, yeah, there's no volumes left. And I don't know if that's bullish or bearish. Like, you're gonna see people argue both ways. People are gonna be like, "Oh, no one's trading anymore. This is what capitulation looks like. It's the bottom." And then people are gonna be like, "Oh, no one's trading anymore. This is what a failed experiment looks like. We're going to zero." I think both of those arguments are valid in a way. It's just basically you're gonna see in hindsight, and you cannot really tell from something like this. Like, every time Bitcoin didn't go to zero, with like when you had low volumes, that tended to be good bottom signals. But then again, like cryptos as a whole. But then again, if it ever goes to zero, that's gonna be how it looks like, right? As in, volumes disappear, no one's trading it anymore, and then suddenly like it's just gonna bleed out.
Yeah, like cycle lows are indistinguishable from failed experiments, which is why they're so hard to time, basically. Yeah.
And I mean, the good part about that is that if you see it and you believe in it, you can still make bets, and at least you have your high conviction bet that you're taking, and at that point you have like quite a bit of upside. Downside is you lose everything, which is also not that nice.
But then there's no one left to make fun of you, so that's the good thing, right?
Exactly. We're all riding down with the ship.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like we'll see how this ends up. But the volumes for sure are dying down. I think it's more bearish than bullish.
Yes.
Especially given how just the macro situation looks like right now, right?
And at these prices too, right? Like, we're
Yes.
not, especially on the majors, we're not even near yearly lows for anything as depressing as that. But the market is barren. Even worse than that, you have some prominent market makers like actively fighting each other on Twitter. Yes. GSR, DWF, Wintermute, just straight off throwing haymakers in the on Twitter, which just isn't a great sign. It's not a great sign for exchanges, not a great sign for liquidity providers. As far as anyone that has anything to do with trading, frankly, I'm not in the best position.
No, I mean, when you start the industry basically devouring itself, like, that's just not good. The funny thing is, like, people will say, "Oh, this is a bottom signal," whatever, but it's just generally not good, because if something goes wrong and they say or do something bad, we all suffer for it. So it's not great. But yeah, the vibes have been deteriorating every month, and you think like, oh, this has to be the low of whatever the fuck this is, and then next month it just gets worse.
Somehow gets worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crypto. I do want to quickly mention that out of sheer boredom and some other factors, so for example, I'm in the final week of this training block that I'm in. So next week I get a break and some more food and get to feel like a human being again. I've started clicking on low time frames again, Don. Mostly like 5-minute stuff, 15-minute stuff based around sort of 4-hour, hourly, daily levels, just that kind of trading. And it's really been a while since I've done it. And like the rust is real, I'll say that much. Like I have a tweet, if you go to my Twitter for the audience's sake, where I post some of those reflections from just 4 or 5 days or so of being back in the arena and trying things. And there's so much stuff that I sort of talk about casually, but it's very hard to implement. Like for example, the very low drawdown tolerance that you have if you haven't clicked in a while and you see price trading below your entry if you're long or above your entry if you're short, like the sort of existential discomfort that superimposes on you, especially within a low time frame trading context. I definitely became sort of desensitized. Well, I became very sensitive to that despite not being so in the past. And just kind of general good trading practices. I've sort of identified that the core is there in terms of like looking for good entries, tight invalidations, not overstaying your welcome. But some of the smaller moving parts, like being able to hold all the way to target and like not over managing the trade, that type of stuff, like I can essentially feel that it's like out of reach. It's like almost there. My fingertips are touching it, but I'm still missing that sort of well-practiced routine of executing in that type of way. I think the smallish, relatively small, by your standards, tiny account that I'm running this on is up like a meager 6 or 7%. Or something like that, which isn't, Twitter P&L card overall returns type of thing. But, I think if you're getting back into it, it's pretty smart to just up your trade frequency, reduce your size, and sort of get back into the flow of things. So that's been a decently fun experiment. If anything comes out of it, then I'll probably talk about it more on future shows or make a tweet or post some stuff. If you never hear about it again, that just means I got liquidated and I'm only going to trade the monthly time frame until I die. So there's a short update on that side of things. And I clearly chose not the best time to get back into it either in terms of the state of the market. But hey, no time like the present, right?
I mean, might as well. Keeping yourself sharp with like small time frame trades, I don't think is the worst idea in the world. Like in general, like when you kind of in the market doing things, once the momentum shifts, and you will see this in the higher time frames, you're still feeling the market basically, which does help even when you're trading the higher time frames. So I think it makes sense. For me, like I technically, like, this was a small time frame trade that I took, right? Basically from the 13th of September to the 19th of September. That's small time frame for me. 6 days of holding. So yeah, I do the same, just like, I guess, like not on the 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, but just on the daily time frame. So I can be in tune with the market on the weekly and the monthly when I need to be. So
yeah, it's just about like keeping a pulse on things, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of the small time frame differences. It's just about just being there, being present, executing your edge, keep staying sharp in general, getting it. And there's something to be said, sort of less quantitatively and more metaphysically, about feeling the flow of the market by being in it as opposed to simply observing it. It's a slightly different qualitative experience, which sounds like voodoo nonsense, but I think it's true.
I agree. It does feel very different whether you're in a position or not.
Yeah, it does. My not financial advice would be that if you're going to do something like that, it's really tempting to just get like an absolutely tiny account and just do that. And I think there's some merit there. But ideally, the account size is such that it's not so big that you overthink it and don't do more experimental stuff or only go for like A++ high conviction mega confluence setups. It doesn't need to be that. But at the same time, it can't be so small that it's completely insignificant and you don't care about the outcomes, you don't care about the process. Because the whole point is to sharpen your process and to be willing to take risks with a slightly higher frequency than you ordinarily would. So ideally, whatever account size or position size that you're trading for those purposes fits into that reasonable middle ground. Where you care, you feel comfortable enough to be experimental, But if you get stuff wrong or go on a losing streak or try something that doesn't work, you're not completely discouraged from your efforts. So that's been my mini week-long journey. Again, if you never hear about it, it just went terribly. Don't ask me about it. You'll get blocked from the channel. But yeah, maybe more on that soon. Also, while we're here, leave a like on these videos. Somehow, Monday markets and Wednesday live streams tend to get more likes than Casual Friday. I think because we lull people to sleep, and then by the time they wake up, the video's over and they click off. But we would appreciate your comments, likes, subscriptions as always. Thanks for sticking around for this show. I think it's our favorite to produce as well. So it's nice that you seem to enjoy it. Let's talk macro, Don. Before you were a bull for 5 days, you were talking about how it's all over in the economy. So,
I was right, no?
Yeah, well, it's worth revisiting some of those. So the monthly S&P rallied into kind of 45 to 4,600. I think I had a Twitter chart where my most extreme level was 45.88, which was good enough. Obviously, I didn't trade any of this. I don't trade indices, kind of keep an eye on them. But the way we discussed it from memory was that if there's any area on this chart where there's going to be some sort of stitch-up trap or fuckery, it's going to be beyond the all-time high or basically around 45 to 4,600 as a really sort of extended lower high relative to the all-time high, right?
Yep.
And that seems to be what's playing out at the moment. There was nothing terribly devastating on the macro side as far as inflation and Fed guidance. Obviously, the dot plot changed a little bit, and now the narrative is shifting around higher for longer, becoming entrenched, that type of stuff. A lot of the optimism around China has subsided somewhat. Commodity, oil's been going up, dollar's been going up, so those sort of pressures are back. But there was nothing sort of groundbreaking to shift market structure in the way that it's been shifted in the last week or so. So the monthly just doesn't look fantastic. I think even, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. Even if we sort of bounce off 4,300, that lowest monthly cluster on the S&P at this point, I no longer think it would make for like a super compelling bottom type of structure. It's just like a bit too close. And I think we pushed a bit too far as into the lower high territory for that to be like a stone cold compelling pullback level. Especially if kind of VIX stays elevated and in general kind of vol gets lifted. I'd expect a meaningful pullback from this type of level to take us below 4,300. That's my monthly view, at least. I don't know what you think about the weekly or other timeframes, or what your view on the S&P is in general. It becomes quite hard to care about this thing as a crypto trader because they correlate. I mean, we used to trade tick for tick with this, right? Like literally tick for tick. And I think maybe a week or two ago, we had the complete opposite end of that, where the S&P could just do whatever and didn't really matter. Most of it, I think historically, at least this year, certainly in the second half of this year, has been S&P up, we don't care, S&P down, we flinch type of thing. So with that said, and now that we've got more price action with the S&P, what's your view on either this thing on its own or whatever correlation implications it might have?
Yeah, so I look at it relatively similar to what you think. 4.3K is the nearest support, which I think needs to hold if you want to make a bullish case. In my mind, and this is something that I've been saying for, it's more than a year now, I think we're going to range between 3.7 and 4.3. We had a little bit of an overthrow here, and I think we're going to be basically somewhere in that range for quite a while. I'd be surprised if not. It's not like I'm betting any significant money on this. Technically don't really care where it goes because I don't have anything riding on it. In Europe, you don't put money in the stock market as like a retirement account, whatever, like the 401k or whatever you have in the USA. So it's kind of like I don't really care too much beyond the price implication that has for crypto, right? And it's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit apprehensive to keep positions in Bitcoin, just because I think if you range between 4.3 and 3.7, if we go to that lower boundary of 3.7, that's going to be a massive pain point in crypto. But I have also noticed, like you said, that it's not been as bad as in like we haven't been in lockstep too much in the last few weeks. It's been a little bit better, but I think that's gonna fall in line the moment you get a significant move on on the S&P, right? Like if the S&P bounces from 4.3 and proves me wrong that it actually just wants to make new all-time highs, then cool. That's probably going to lead to price upside in Bitcoin as well. Especially now that it's not been as bad as it used to be, where all the downside of the S&P we got and all the upside was missed. Now, like we've had downside on the S&P and it's not been as bad on Bitcoin relatively. So I think if the S&P bounces from 4.3, you're going to see some upside, but I don't think that's necessarily gonna stick even if it bounces, right? So I think like 4.3, good support, might make it bounce. I generally think we're probably gonna spend some time below it anyway, and that makes me hold back on Bitcoin and hold back on altcoins and hold back on crypto as a whole. It's kind of my view.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we take your range thesis that eventually we might make our way down to 3,700, it's kind of scary to think what the crypto prices would look like at that point, because from here that's a 13 to 14% decline in the S&P of all things. Now it doesn't have to happen in one candle or immediately, obviously, and there could be bounces in between, but just in terms of just like the path to getting there and ending up there one way or another, it's hard to think of a way that crypto doesn't look like total shit if we get there. So and it starts to kind of paint a generally ugly risk-off picture, right? They're like, okay, we didn't correlate at all positively on the way up. We showed sort of decent relative weakness, or at least there wasn't that same bid. Now this thing is breaking down. We seem to be more sensitive to it. And actually, it's not just breaking down. It's, moving to the other extreme of the range. With crypto having its own supply issues, you can sort of build a pretty solid, multifaceted FUD, multiple FUDs flying around type of thing if you wanted to. So that wouldn't be great, but I agree, at least for casual Friday purposes, 4,300 is a useful pivot to watch. And then maybe even the midpoint of that range isn't completely useless because there is some monthly structure there. The breakout level at 4.1, 4K, roughly around there. Could be something there as well.
Oh yeah, I'm not a hater. I think in general, like the one good thing that we have in our corner is basically the ETF, right?
Right.
And that's gonna have some good flows. So if the S&P,
especially if it gets denied, right?
Oh yeah, I mean if that gets denied, we're trading below 20K, I think.
Right.
But I don't think that's gonna happen. Like I'd be surprised.
I still think it's Chad trade, to be honest. ETF deny, market completely fucking craters, and you buy it. Maybe not on the same day or whatever, but just in terms of just like higher time frame position trading, I feel like that's one that would age like decently well as long as your drawdown tolerance is like acceptable.
Oh yeah, I mean I would 100% buy that.
Same.
Like if the ETF gets denied, and I think that's very, very unlikely, and Bitcoin trades below 20K, I'd actually probably wire in money that I didn't plan to.
Well, I'll be on that same Titanic violin room with you, Don, playing my finest.
Let's fucking go. Yeah, I think it just makes sense at that point. Like at that point, you just give the SEC a big fuck you, and buy a shitload, while other people panic sell. Like I like that trade a lot. I wish it was more likely for some reason. Like it just makes me happy. Like if I can buy an ETF denial candle, like fucking hell, I'd love it. But
Don, you could just buy higher.
Yeah, no, but I think in general, like that's unlikely. So we will have some good crypto flows, or like at least Bitcoin flows, that alleviate a little bit of the pain if the S&P went down.
Yes.
But I think, we're kind of in a shitty position for me at least, because I want to be bullish Bitcoin because I think the ETF is basically almost certain in my head. But also, like, where the fuck is the macro economy? Where the fuck is the S&P trading? Like, oil and dollars just giga mooning, like that doesn't really paint a nice picture for risk assets as a whole. So you're kind of like you're struggling between like one of the best fundamental narratives that we've had in years, and also just everything else being against that. And it's a really tough position to be in, and I hate it because oftentimes we get rallies and you don't have a narrative to it, and that's why it fizzles out. Or like you get a narrative that could have gone like 2 or 3x higher, and you're like, God, this kind of blows. And then you get a really good narrative, and it kind of coincides with this ginormous shit that is the global markets right now, right? And I'm not a big fan. It's kind of sad. We could have had low prices and then got the ETF saga. Basically, that would have been much more fun. But it's just not how it's gonna go.
Yeah, or like the correlated rally narrative would have been nice, you know. Then you get the S&P hitting monthly resistance and BTC hitting monthly resistance at like 35, 38. That would have painted a nice picture. We have quite a messy one on our hands instead. So it does really seem like the market is extremely centered on spot ETF is like the only good thing, reasonably good thing on the horizon, and everything else on its own, you know, bar that is kind of shit. I know there's like some early halving cope coming around, which we've discussed on the show before. But I think in terms of just like impact on real flows, it's the market essentially is hoping for a spot ETF because left to its own devices with the macro and just kind of technicals and risk asset pricing you've discussed, it's not particularly accommodating at the moment.
Yeah, so. I actually had a few people in my comments when I was talking about not buying ETH. They were like, "Oh, you're such an idiot. ETH is gonna get a spot ETF first." And I was like, "The fuck are you talking about? Like, did I miss something?" like, it's actually been wild. Like my comments have been like a treasure trove of just completely mentally ill people. No offense. That's probably one of probably one of the bigger compliments you can give someone in crypto.
That's true.
But yeah, it's been wild. Like the delusion levels are quite high. I wonder why
like, they're going to deny the Bitcoin one and approve the ETH one. It's like, oh boy.
Oh boy, yeah. Yeah, and also like a bunch of people are obviously talking about the futures ETH ETF. I think that's pretty much completely meaningless. We've had a shitload of those for Bitcoin, didn't do anything for price or nuked it. I don't think that's in any shape or form meaningful. So I would ignore that.
Yeah, it's literally, I think it's primarily the batch that keeps getting delayed, which includes the BlackRock one. That's going to be like 95, 99% of the signal. And everything else is probably messy in comparison. So yeah, that's the macro ETF, whatever type of nonsense. Let's do some news, Don. Chat about the state of the market. I'm opening it up in a very clumsy way again, return to tradition.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
JP Morgan says Ethereum's activity post-Shanghai upgrade has been disappointing. So this is, you know, you're upsetting the bankers, Don, with your bearish ETH talk. They're not very happy. But yeah, this article basically discusses in this research report thing how the supply is shrinking and the staking rate rose sharply, but network activity has been garbage, basically.
Yep.
And the way the ETH Ponzi mechanic works, the whole deflationary flywheel type of thing, is you need people using the chain, right? And you need economic activity on chain. And given the market is a barren wasteland for speculation at the moment, barring some short windows where, you know, some exceptions to that, as a result, the proof of stake upgrade and the deflationary burn mechanisms, all of that, they're not really getting a chance to shine as they would in a bull market, which sounds really self-evident. But I think it's one of those where you sort of feel the impact on both extremes. Like if the market's really dead and on-chain is really dead, you can really feel it. And then the sort of counteracting force is that if the market's bullish and we get the full, you know, deflationary burn Ponzi effect, I think that's going to be stronger than ETH when it was proof of work in a bull market. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does.
But overall, I guess it can't be terribly surprising to arrive at the conclusion that, hey, everyone's dead, no one's speculating, and this isn't good for ETH. Because that's like the whole point, basically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not a big shock, realistically, especially given that stablecoins have just not been doing so well, right? So like stablecoins are some of the main activity on chain. It just makes sense because stablecoins are actually useful in comparison to like 99% of the other crap that we have in the market. But if no one, like if stablecoin supply kind of like shrinks and no one uses stablecoins anymore because they can get better yield in the TradFi world, that's obviously not good for these chains, and they become ghost chains real quick, especially if they focus on other layers, right? So it's kind of like if you see activity on other layers, not on the main one, but you need to have the activity on the main layer. And I mean, excuse me if I'm saying something dumb because I really don't care about this stuff too much, but it just makes sense, right? Like if you have all of this activity somewhere else and not on ETH, and then you don't get the fees in, and then that whole that whole Ponzinomics, they don't really work that well anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's right. And also, if you think about the general kind of use cases for this, I mean, if no one's speculating and no one's trading, then by definition, like what 99% of crypto protocols just become not very useful.
Yep.
Especially because given liquidity is bad enough on like tier one centralized exchanges, why would you just pay more to do it on chain unless there's some reg arb necessity to do so? And then even and the same I think applies to swaps and things like that. Even when it comes to yield and yield farming, it definitely doesn't help that the risk-free rate from just T-bills is so bloody high, with like virtually none of the counterparty risk, as opposed to funding North Korea's missile program just by like trying to earn a few percent on your stable coins.
Don't talk about it.
Yeah, I know. Gonna get, if we were monetized, which we're not, we're gonna get demonetized. But yeah, it's like it's the entire backbone is speculation. You know, speculation is for fee accrual. The protocols are centered around speculation. If that's not there, then everything suffers. That's the point we keep coming back to. Maybe in like 2-3 cycles or earlier, if you're optimistic, once we get, if the whole real world asset RWA narrative catches on, we might be able to build something a bit more resilient that's not entirely premised on betting and gambling and risk appetite, or at least does it in a slightly more subtle and sustainable way. But absent that, if everything is just built around betting and there are no bettors left because they're all broke or it's too expensive or sentiment's garbage, there's nothing to bet on, whatever version of that, then yeah, this can't be a huge surprise. But I still think, as we've discussed, I think many months ago, the whole proof of stake, burn, Ponzinomic thing, it's future bull market fuel, right? So that's probably when it'll shine the most. But for the time being, when the market's like this, you can't expect it to make ETH uncorrelated or some sort of market magic of that nature. So
yeah, I agree.
There we go.
I mean, it's gonna be such a fun narrative to trade. It's also gonna make ETH completely unusable in the next bull market, I think. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm excited.
That's never happened before, Don.
No. We've never topped on like networks being unusable before.
Correct.
It's actually quite fun. Like when you look back on when like the networks were the worst, like you had the worst congestion or you had to pay like a shitload of fees. It's almost always very, very close to cycle tops, right? And I think it makes sense, right? That's one of the things that made me bearish in 2017-18, where in my opinion, the biggest bubble that we've had in the last at least 5 years took place. And my reasoning was basically, hey, like you cannot use any of these altcoins because they're completely useless. I still remember IOTA. Like I used IOTA, and my money was stuck for 2 or 3 days. And I was like, okay, this is not great. And then I went to ETH because I wanted to do something. And it took ages, and I had to pay a shitload in fees. And I was like, well, at least Bitcoin can do something. And then Bitcoin took like, I don't know, like transaction fees of like $200 or something, 100, whatever, too high. I was like, okay, this is all garbage, right? And that was the reason why I sold in 17, 18 on top of the parabolic price. And if you go back in history and like with the NFT tops and all of it, it's very often kind of coincides with these kind of events where you can just not use crypto, because people, I think, during those times realized that this shit is just not made for being used yet. And the yet, I mean, has been a thing for the last 10 years, right? Like it's always yet, but yeah, don't need to talk about that one.
But okay, all these layer 2s now, Don, we're fine.
Yeah.
And Solana, then, the monolith.
Yeah, because everyone wants to use them, right?
Correct. This time it's different. I remember I've got the same memory of 2017, trying to move, I had like a bread wallet on my phone or something. And I'm like, okay, I should probably put at least some of this into a hardware wallet. And then I looked at the transaction costs and I was like, the future of finance is here. This is very expensive.
It costs you more in transaction fees than just move. Like
literally.
And yeah, this is kind of like it's been a thing too, like in the last bull run with the NFTs, where I bought a bunch of NFTs and paid like $150 in transaction fees for every single one of them, and you had to do it. And then you pay, like you buy 100 NFTs, and then you pay $100 transaction fees for every single one, and you're just kind of like, this is just fucking dumb. And so that's one to watch right now. We have the opposite. No one's using this shit.
Yeah. gas is
besides
free, basically. Like,
yeah, besides Binance doing fuck ups, did you see that?
yeah, they spent like an extortionate amount on gas fees relative to
Yeah,
the overall value being transacted, right? It gave
yeah,
Adam Cochran an aneurysm,
as usual.
as usual.
I like that's also one topic that I don't quite understand, right? Like it's pretty obvious that like he thinks that Binance is going to zero, and I mean I cannot fault him for it. Like whatever, you have that belief, you have that belief. There's a lot of kind of like shitty things that are happening, or like shitty signs basically at Binance, right? Like a bunch of people leaving, all that kind of stuff. So you can make assumptions, but at some point it's just like enough's enough, right? Like you've made your point. Like what's the point of just going on Twitter every day, write about only one topic and the one topic only, and that's like, okay, this part of crypto is going to zero, and it's like, but there's no short on your end. There's no money that you will earn, and everyone that follows you already knows what the fuck you're talking about. Like, and I don't want to hate on the guy. Like, if like I've done the same or similar before, but like at some point enough's enough. No, like I don't see what the point is anymore.
Engagement checks. No, I don't think it's that
Maybe.
cynical. If I had to, whatever, make the case for it in terms of like provide a defense or steel man in some nature, I'd basically say that for a lot, I mean, for a lot of people post the 2021 blowups of all these centralized lenders, exchanges, etc., they're probably quite inclined to overcorrect when it comes to public warning and signaling, and overshoot as to how much they want to wave the flag if they think there's actual wrongdoing going on. Maybe that's way too generous as an assumption, but that's at least one plausible explanation. That's, for example, Yevgeny from Wintermute. He even tweeted something of that nature, being like, well, why are people annoyed that we're finally calling out the bad actors? So I think there's some course correction going on in terms of how people view the payoff of staying silent versus waving the flag if they think something's really going on.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer people waving the flag, and I'm not trying to hate on the guy. I actually like that he's calling them out, because the best part about like all of these accusations, and I think this is the same with Tether, for example, back in the day, right? Tether was like very very shady for quite a while. Let's put it that
For
way,
sure.
and a bunch of people in the community made it their mission to bring them down and to show that it's all a scam. And at the end of the day, it still exists, and it's pretty, at least from the available evidence, it seems pretty clear that they have the money that they're supposed to have. But what the people did that kind of like just looked into it was they made sure that no more shady stuff would happen, right? And that at the end of the day, I think helps. Like when you know that you're being watched, when you know that you have to act right, you're less likely to do like shady shit. So I think even though like some people go way overboard, like it's a good thing overall, that it's happening rather than that people are sitting silent. So like I don't want to hate on the guy. I actually like that it's being called out. I just find it interesting. Like every time I log on to Twitter, like 50% of my timeline is just him shit talking Binance, which is fair enough.
And the
But
other 50% is Justin Sun and Huobi, right?
oh yeah, but yeah, what he's doing, yeah. I mean, he has a bone to pick. But then
His
again, like
Excellency.
all of these people I find shady too, right? So it's not like I'm on their
Sure.
side.
Yeah, I think like a large part of it, like waving the flag is one thing, but it also depends on what you actually do as a result. So, for example, if you have no money on the line, I might become suspicious of your claims, right? Or if you take the other extreme and you decide that as a result of your perceived findings, all of crypto is a scam and the entire house of cards is going to come toppling down and you're not going to have any exposure to the industry at any point until this thing blows up. As we know from a lot of the Tether oriented news accounts, let's call them that, that can be a very like costly decision because we had you basically missed out on 2021 and crypto full stop
Oh
if
yeah,
you
more than
became
that. Yeah.
sufficiently entrenched in those views. So you need to have either like some sort of bet that makes the payoff worth it, or like an invalidation for those beliefs that allows you to still speculate if the industry offers upside. So for example, if you're like super anti-Binance, but you want to hedge that view, then maybe you just don't hold funds there and hold funds elsewhere so that if the market looks good, you can still trade while staying somewhat consistent with your beliefs, right? And it's also one of those things where I think Tether is a good example of this, where if the market gets sufficiently bullish, even if you're right about the holes in the wrongdoing, they can essentially fix it if there's enough money. I know that sounds like really stupid and juvenile, but I really believe it. So
oh no, it's how it's been going on, I think, during the 2020 bull market.
yeah. So like you need to time this stuff. So even if you think there's a hole, but then the conditions shift such that you can make a reasonable case that they've been able to plug it, then you need to adjust your priors. Because if they, whatever they means, were fraudulent or incomplete in the past, doesn't mean that continues indefinitely. Certainly not if they're making billions in revenue. I think Tether again is the best example of that, where we know as a matter of legal fact they weren't fully collateralized for significant portions of the early days, but now they have like billions of dollars to throw around as a result of interest rates, right? So that obviously shifted, but for a lot of people, they've used and shift with it. So
oh yeah, I saw people not buying Bitcoin below 10K, significantly below 10K.
Oh yeah.
Before the 2017 bubble, even because of Tether, and then during the crash afterwards, they didn't wanna because of Tether, and Bitcoin's now trading at 26,000, and they still maintain the belief that they're right, which cool, but you're not really making any money, right? And if you're spending all your day talking something or trash talking a market, and the market keeps going up, what are you actually gaining from it other than just becoming a bitter person? And I think there's really not that much that really works in your favor there. Like the whole, like if you hate something that much, I think ignoring it is the best way to go about it. Like if you think crypto's a scam, like entirely a scam, I think the best way to do it is just like sell your stuff, walk away, and never look at it again, because otherwise you're gonna turn insane. And we've seen a lot of people actually lose their mind. Like there's actually examples out there on crypto Twitter where people are just completely gone, based on just having one belief and then believing in it so strongly and never being right, or like that one thing never played out, and now they're stuck in this hellhole, basically trying to justify to themselves why they had that belief or why they still have it, and it's not healthy. So some people need to be on the careful end, I think, because it's very easy to slip into these kind of conspiracy theories and like go very down, like go down like a dark path, and it doesn't really help anyone. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And there's just better ways to live your life than being convinced that the industry is like a massive fraud and then committing all your time to that same industry, especially if there's no like financial payoff for that view. At least write a book, which is what some people do. Yes. Not financial advice, obviously. Also, just a random piece of news before I jump to the next one. Did you see this degen exchange that Rollbit launched? Which is basically like a sister exchange, sub-exchange type of thing that was focused around like lower cap on-chain stuff. And they launched this literally like, it feels, I think it must have been less than a month ago, unless time has been moving very quickly. And today they announced that due to regulatory uncertainty and low adoption, we've decided to sunset degen exchange for now. And they're also sunsetting rollbot.com. So Gainsey's impact, Gainsey leaving is clearly being felt. But yeah, look, the reg stuff still sucks. Like, this Rollbit thing, Bybit is leaving the UK, which I feel really shitty about. So, there are new FCA financial promotion laws that we're going to go to jail over, obviously. So yeah, no fun on that front, Don. No. There is, however, an interesting article that I think kind of plays into some of these points. This is from blockchain.com CEO. And he said, and the title is Blockchain.com CEO doesn't see crypto credit markets coming back in the same way after 3AC. So this is something we've sort of touched on tangentially, that part of the reason 2021 was so crazy was, yes, we had the most accommodating, insane monetary policy ever, right? As a result of the response to the global pandemic and stuff. But then crypto credit markets were also just completely insane. And so much of it was via, like, the GBTC trade and backroom dealings and accepting shitty collateral and just lending out billions of dollars with no due diligence or transparency and lending it out to people who were then just getting levered to the tits, and participants who were supposed to be delta neutral just slugging deltas like there's no tomorrow. That's a pretty impressive but also rare combination, right? So if you wanted to make a sort of crypto-specific case for a more moderate bull market in the future, I think it would have to be centered around the shift in credit markets or market structure, or kind of lessons learned from 2021 that wouldn't come up in the same way in future years. So, you wouldn't get that amount of credit expansion in the system. You wouldn't get that amount of reckless lending. You wouldn't get that amount of slugging deltas and hyper speculation from these participants and institutions that should be more delta neutral than not. Do you think that there's any argument to be made there? Because obviously the natural counter argument is that, lol, everyone says the next cycle is going to be smaller than the one before it, but always human greed and speculation and new mechanisms of betting big take over it, so it ends up being bigger anyway. Where do you fall between those two extremes?
It's actually really hard to say. I think both. Like it's very odd, but like for me, I think about it and I'm like, oh, the stock market has become so easy to trade. Like there's so many ways to kind of go put your money on the stock market and just trade some dumb shit, that we don't have that inherent kind of advantage in crypto anymore, right? So like that's something in my mind where I'm like, maybe the next bull market is going to be just smaller because people are just going to trade something else as well. Like people, it's not just cryptos in the bull market, and it's the easiest place to kind of do dumb shit. So people go there. No, now you can do dumb shit everywhere else too. And then, like you said, with the whole credit thing, so I'm kind of like on the fence. I think it's more likely than not gonna be different. Like I think we've learned at least a little bit from the mistakes of the past, because these mistakes were so large that they just will have a lasting impact, and they will change that inherent, like basically crypto went from like a small family, right? And this is how it was with the bigger players in general. Like everyone knows each other, and you're like, oh yeah, we've been doing business with them for a number of years, so let's just give them some money uncollateralized, do a bunch of risky shit because I mean they're kind of friends, we know them, they wouldn't do anything dumb. And I think we went from that, like that familiar feeling, to, and this is something that like like we talked about earlier with the market makers kind of giving each other shit, right? This is something that you can see in the market right now as well. I think it just basically went into a whole different ball game where basically that familiar, like that family feeling, like small family, small like group of people is just gone. Like next bull market is going to be more focused on institutional players, which I don't think will play soft with any of the crypto players. So I think it's going to be different, and it's going to be less crazy, I think, on the lending side of things. But we'll see.
Yeah, you might have to go out further on the risk curve to emulate what we saw in BTC and ETH. That might be a kind of middle ground cope solution, right? Where we had insane degeneracy on BTC and ETH, if you think about it, certainly via the GBTC trade and just in general going up to 69k, etc. It could be the case that, given that's where most of the larger players operate, that'll be a bit more tempered, or maybe take a while, or like a different trend. But if you want to see 2021 style frenzy, lending, leverage, etc., you'll have to go out further on the risk curve to DeFi related stuff or on chain, etc. That could be one way it plays out. I mean, obviously, as a speculator, I hope that I'm completely wrong about all of that, especially as someone who just likes trading BTC and ETH. It'd be much more convenient if none of what we said was true, and we sort of run it back Ponzi style and sell before it all ends, purely from a trading perspective. But I don't think that combination of monetary policy plus insane credit markets is inconsequential, especially if you consider the regulatory burden, scrutiny, reputational scrutiny we face as a result as well. But Don, nothing fixes all of that like rising prices. So
and
there's always that.
I think basically the way you could get that back is by actually getting crypto to do something, right? Like if crypto is actually getting adoption, proper adoption, not just bullshit gambling adoption, maybe we actually have a shot at doing it again. because so far from what I'm seeing, and I mean, I'm not really the most techie kind of guy, but from what I'm seeing, like 99% of the stuff is speculation and speculation only. And if we get a little bit of actually usefulness or like ways to kind of turn this into something, I think there's more than enough fuel to kind of squeeze a big move out of it, maybe even bigger than the ones we've had. But for now, I think it needs to be based on something rather than be based on promises like we've had before. I don't think the whole this is the money of the future thing flies if it's actually not the money of the future, right? We actually have to make it into something. And if I mean, I'm just going to speculate and do nothing, but the people that are
Same.
working on it, that is actually useful.
Can
and
the
if we
builders
get
build,
that, then,
please?
yeah, I mean, just fucking move your asses. But I think at that point, like we can have the whole argument again, and then there's much higher prices in line, I think. But until then, I struggle to see kind of like that whole industry go as crazy again. Like we need something good.
Yeah, momentum via adoption as opposed to momentum via fraud would be nice. But I don't know. It feels like not enough time has passed. We're still picking up the pieces from 2021, 2022. So the 2024 halving thing, I don't know, seems a bit soon, but who knows? We're just here for the daily bonk, am I right? So, not the best people to listen to for that. We'll zoom through a lot of these. Tether increased stablecoin loans to 5.5 billion after saying it planned to stop. So they're just lending USDT again, it sounds like. I'm not terribly surprised or worried about this at the moment, simply because of just how much bloody money Tether made. I don't mean bloody money as in like criminal enterprise or something. I just mean that in the hyperbolic sense. They've made a lot of money from this high interest rate environment. If they want to take some risk, they were buying BTC at one point. They seem to be providing what they define as over-collateralized by liquid assets loans. So I'm generally okay with Tether playing around with the massive cash pile that they have. Especially given their dominant position, and the US regulatory position has not killed Circle and USDC, but certainly sort of pushed them lower, and Tether still is king. So taking those two things into account, one, their dominant position, and two, the hordes of cash that they have, I'm not super concerned. But if that were to become more risky, or maybe not fully collateralized lending, or if the interest rates environment were to change very suddenly, or if they started going further out on the risk curve and degenning BTC to a greater extent, etc., all of that would be worrying. That my preference is that my stablecoins stay very conservative, but they've done a pretty good job of milking what's been available for the past couple of years. So I'm not like super scared about this. But what do you think?
No, I'm on the same team. Tether survived so much now that I just kind of think they're not going to do too dumb shit. I think that's in the past. But
yeah, and they did some dumb shit in the past.
Like, oh yeah, and I think in general, like the only risk, I mean not the only risk, but one of the major risks that they have is basically just regulatory. And at that point, like as long as they have the money, like what's the worst that can happen? But yeah, I'm pretty chill. Like I don't trust any stablecoin, and I don't trust any exchange, and I don't trust anyone in crypto as a whole.
Not even me.
I trust, but we know each other in real life, so. But yeah, it's basically like, in my mind, it's very unlikely that that they don't have money that they should have, or that they get themselves into a position where that would be the case. It just seems very unlikely.
Yeah, I think there was a particular window where Tether could have failed quite spectacularly, but having overcome that, I think the odds are pretty low now, unless they do something really dumb. So let's
or regulatory stuff gets them screwed.
It's fine. They're too busy bashing Circle and USDC to to split their efforts.
But it went the other way for quite a while. So
true. Yeah, definitely. Friend Tech rival Post Tech activity picks up with 1.8 million in daily volume. We sort of talked about this. I think the best way to sort of, the most applicable framework for this type of thing is to see it as an altcoin trade / yield farm type of thing, with all these knockoffs. in general, I think it's more bearish than bullish when you start seeing a ton of copycat projects. Friend Tech has been more resilient than I thought initially because they had that second big spike in inflows in TVL. And it's also arguably bullish for Friend Tech if the competitors are barely managing to get any traction and these sort of vampire attacks just aren't really effective. They're getting like a couple of percent of the TVL, etc. at most, and then sort of die
it went
out.
down. Yeah, it went
Yeah,
down a lot today. So.
exactly. So that's pretty good for Friend Tech in like relative terms. I don't know in absolute terms where it ends up. There does reach a certain point with how these bonding curves work, where once you get that initial influx or two, you kind of need new inflows to sustain it, or at least new mechanisms within the protocol to incentivize further speculation, participation, and so on. I think at the moment, the market is kind of keeping it afloat for two reasons. One is it's kind of the only game in town. Three reasons. Two is the big accounts are incentivized from the ETH fees to keep tweeting about it and keep active. And third is the whole points system potentially being a precursor to a token or an airdrop and holding out hopes for that. It'd be really interesting to see the sustainability of that and how long they can keep it going. You could make a very cynical argument that they should just keep teasing a token or an airdrop and never do it. Because as soon as you actually launch and ship something in crypto, that tends to be pretty bearish. But I think, all those 3 points are the main reason we're seeing more longevity than at least I would expect from a sort of deep bear market social type protocol.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons it's just because it's fun. At least it has been for me. But yeah, in general, I do agree with you. It's been sticking around. I wouldn't want to necessarily to take huge bets on it, but I mean, I think I have almost 40 ETH in keys, or used to have. I think it's lower now, of people, and I'm just kind of whatever. Don't really care where that goes, but it's fun to kind of see people in their own rooms kind of write about whatever they think is going on in the market or whatever is going on in their lives.
Or in my training routine, in my
Oh
case.
yeah, exactly.
Lots of alpha there.
It's just kind of been a way to kind of see all of these people get a little bit more, I mean, or a little bit more intimate. That sounds very wrong.
No, that's exactly what it's for, Don.
But yeah, I don't know. I've been having fun, but as always, I don't recommend anyone to do anything other than trade Bitcoin, basically.
On the monthly time frame, yeah.
Exactly. That's the only thing anyone sane should do.
That's how we make all our mad reflink money, Don. You know, the volumes we get from monthly time frame traders, just insane.
Oh yeah, I mean, then again, we've never really got any reflink money. Too dumb to shill reflinks, really. The only time where we started shilling reflinks is, I think, with Woo, realistically.
Yes.
And that was when the market was completely dead. So
yeah,
we're pretty damn good at this.
And the two people shilling it are monthly time frame. You know, the market's shit. Go do something else, people.
Yes.
Which is really good for revenue.
And you literally promoted Woo by saying you shouldn't have any money on exchanges at the start of the
exactly.
show.
Genius, really.
Oh yeah, it's going well. It's going well.
Sorry to the Woo guys if you listen to this. You're great. It's not you, it's me. Useful line there. Final article, Don, is about Mt. Gox pushes back deadline to 2024, but some payments might still come this year. This is just an ongoing meme at this point, right?
Dude, this is just fucking
So for those unaware, basically this whole Mt. Gox repayment thing gets pushed back every year to the next year until it's the next year, then it gets pushed back another year. So it's almost an infinite regress of sorts.
And then the bearish threaders come out, and every year they come out and they're but this year the Mt. Gox Bitcoin are going to be distributed, and it's going to be huge influx of Bitcoin. And they've been doing this since 2016?
Yeah,
17?
something like that. Yeah.
Literally people were telling me not to buy Bitcoin in 2017 because of the whole Mt. Gox thing. Is what it is.
It's almost been a decade since the collapse. 2014. Unreal.
It's not nice. I mean, imagine you had 1,000 Bitcoin stuck on Mt. Gox, and then you think it's gone, and then every single year someone comes to you and is now you're finally getting paid, and every single year it gets delayed by another year, and you're almost you don't have any money, but you're almost a millionaire, because if you get your shit, then you're gonna be one. But you don't get it, and
Oh, it's so
like,
painful.
I mean, it's just
I mean, look, the
horrendous.
trustee is clearly a permable, and he thinks BTC is going to go to like 200K, so he just keeps delaying it in order to benefit the creditors. So
To their credit, at least they kept it in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin kept going up.
yes, yeah. So he's just forcing them to diamond hand it. It's fine, Don.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at the FTX thing, they're selling everything, right? So
Yeah.
and they did so at low prices, if I remember correctly.
And some of the venture stuff that they sold was just awful. Like crypto and TradFi stuff. It's just, yeah. And the fees as well. You know, there are lots of threads from smart lawyers in terms of how this is being billed, and it's pretty egregious out there.
I mean, it's as criminal as the whole FTX saga. Like, it's just not okay.
Not
Like,
great.
you take people that got scammed and then you scam them. Like, I mean, it's a very popular tactic. Actually, I've seen this mentioned in a lot of places, that people that are like got scammed are very vulnerable.
Interesting.
Basically because they're just trying to find some hope, and then they're easily to latch onto something and actually got scammed again. But yeah, it's just fucking horrendous. It's just very, very sad. That whole thing is just like just shit. But
Okay,
I mean,
Novogratz will save us. He's doing so. The Galaxy is doing some of the distribution. Don, you know,
yes,
the
of
guy with the
course.
Luna tattoo is going to do a great job, I'm sure.
Yes, I mean, I'm guessing he's gonna do okay on that front.
Yeah. Execution wise, I mean, how much worse can it be than 3AC's execution for the Luna BTC buys, right? Like, if that's the standard.
Yep, exactly.
I should really make a note to put some sort of positive news article as the last one, because we always end up with some doomer, dreary note. I look forward to Casual Fridays when the market is in a good spot and it's just positive headline after positive headline. But for the time being, this is what we have. That's really it for this week. If you enjoyed the show, leave a like on this video, leave us a comment. We read all of them and are grateful for your feedback. Follow Don for his next Bitcoin Pico bottom to Pico top or vice versa thread. And follow me for something, rather. I'm sure, you know, once every 6 months, I'll post a useful thread about some futures data that you don't care about. But nonetheless, I hope you all had an excellent week. Thank you to Woo for supporting the show. Links are available in the description below if you are interested in centralized exchange trading. If you're not, we don't blame you. Neither are we, to be honest. But that's all we know and all we do. So have an excellent week. And we'll see you next week for more of the same, I imagine. Goodbye.